I used to think that Oxfam was a dull but worthy charity. All I knew about them was that they had charity shops where your mum bought your clothes and they helped feed starving kids in Africa with flies on their faces. Man, if only the current trend for eating insects had been around then, the problem could have resolved itself. And Oxfam had adverts saying, just £2 a month can supply a family in Africa with clean water, which made me want to change supplier. My last water bill was £280 and it literally falls out the sky for free in Britain. How can it be cheaper to provide water to people in the drought-ridden desert? We're totally being mugged off. But anyway, now Oxfam have gone full on teenage white girl woke. They just brought out a guide to inclusive language for their staff and it's 92 pages long. That's not very inclusive to the people who have to take a month off to read it, and it's not very inclusive to the starving kids who don't get any food because Oxfam are making sure they know all the pronouns instead of making sandwiches. Inclusive? I think they might just want to be included in a picnic. The whole guide is mental. Sorry, I'm not allowed to say mental because that's not inclusive language. I should say this guide is neurodivergent. Let's look at some of the changes. They tell staff not to say that they stand with people that they support because it potentially alienates people unable to stand. I swear, I'm not making this up. I suppose you can't say you sit with people either because it's offensive to people with no buttocks. They tell staff to avoid saying biological male or female as well because no one, whether cisgender or transgender, gets to choose what sex they're assigned at birth. Look, nobody gets to choose their hair colour or how many fingers they've got either. Like sex is just an immutable biological fact. The guide says that instead of male and female, you should use AFAB or AMAB. So these are acronyms meaning assigned female or male at birth. Or use the term womuxin. That's woman spelt with an X. I'm not entirely sure what that's supposed to mean, unless it's referencing chromosomes, which are technically banned from this guide because they don't recognise biological sex. How is any of this inclusive? Oxfam deal with people in poverty who have English as a second language a lot of the time. They're more likely to know words like woman or female than womuxin or assigned female at birth. The guide also says you should avoid saying women and children, because women and children reaffirms the patriarchal view that women are as helpless as children, neglecting women's actual and potential roles. Instead, use phrases that do not categorise women and children in the same group. Where appropriate, acknowledge that men are or can be victims as well. Man, if an Oxfam boat sinks, they can't say women and children first. By the time they finish working out what the correct genders they should be using, the boat will be on the seabed and everybody's going to be dead. The words mother and father are of course banned now in case it offends gender diverse people, and the phrase people who become pregnant should be used instead of expectant mothers. Who's this to be inclusive to? Male seahorses? Maybe in Brighton you can find a few trans men who are pregnant, but has this ever been an issue for Somalian refugee camps? Terms such as the elderly and seniors should be avoided too, to afford respect and dignity to old people apparently. Listen, some old people need to know that they're old. Madonna, for example, she's not so much the queen of pop as the queen of popped her hip. She's still rolling around on the ground with her flaps out. Come on. The guide says that the word headquarters shouldn't be used as it implies a power dynamic that is very colonial, reinforcing hierarchical power issues and a top-down approach. A top-down approach is bad, you say? I assume the CEO of Oxfam will be stepping down and giving up his 125 grand salary to create a non-hierarchical company. Imagine being the CEO of Oxfam, by the way. Nobody make those starving kids a sandwich till I get my 125 grand. They also apologise for writing the report in English. They say it's the language of a colonising nation. We acknowledge the Anglo-supremacy of the sector as part of its coloniality. We recognise that the dominance of English is one of the key issues that must be addressed in order to decolonise our ways of working and shift power. So an English organisation is apologising for using English, even though it's the most spoken language in the world, so is by definition the most inclusive language to use. That's just mental. The guide spends ages discussing the correct words for ethnicity. They tell us not to use ethnic minority because it places the emphasis on that ethnicity being in a minority or having less power in a particular context. Instead, you should say minority ethnic person, minoritized ethnic person, or marginalized ethnic person. It's the same thing. You've just changed the order of the words. Minority ethnic is the same as ethnic minority. and marginalised ethnic person stereotypes them as victims. And it isn't true either. Wait for the ad break after this video. I bet it contains a mixed race couple with a transgender kid. And then the guy goes on to say that we should say global majority instead of ethnic minority, and say global minority instead of white, because globally only 15% of people are white, the actual ethnic minority. Does this mean that white people will start getting some special treatment? Maybe we'll be allowed back in some adverts again? The guide also says not to use the terms BAME, BME, mixed race, or coloured, and instead use BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous and People of Colour. Man, can these people not just pick a term and stick with it for more than 2 weeks? I know in a fortnight we're going to have to call BIPOC people by another acronym. Also, people of colour is the same as coloured people. They've just come full circle and started using a racist term again. And Indigenous people includes white people who, even though it's a hate crime to say it, can be indigenous to a land. Britain! So that's not going to go down well with woke right on people. They also say that you should avoid mankind because the word mankind has an inherent association with maleness. Listen, what's wrong with maleness? Everyone slags off the patriarchy, but we've got to recognise that it built the modern world. It built the infrastructure that's the foundation for civilization. Give mankind some respect. I'd like to see the feminarchy try and run a sewage plant. Oh, Crescinda, I've got sweet corn under my shellacs. Or build a North Sea oil rig out of crochet. The guide also tells staff to use the term sex worker instead of prostitute because it's vitally important to refer to the person who's wanking you off in a Namibian truck stop toilet by the correct word. This part of the guide should be useful to staff since Oxfam workers were caught hiring prostitutes for orgies in Haiti and sexually exploiting children. Being inclusive, isn't that great when you're actually including children in your orgies? And now they're lecturing us on the inclusive term to call prostitutes? This is like being lectured on babysitting by Jimmy Savile. Is this guide even inclusive? Well, it's inclusive to the privileged, overpaid university graduates who clog up the charity sector. It's not inclusive to the impoverished and hungry people who actually need charity. Oxfam say that words have got power. I think when you're starving, a sandwich has got more power. But they're right, words do have power. The power to shape reality and define the parameters of debate. If you control language, you control thought. You can paint British history as purely evil colonisation, ignoring the benefits we brought to the world. You can define biological sex as a changeable whim. You can define white people as inherently racist and sinful. Oxfam, like the rest of the left, don't really care about materially helping people anymore. They just want to ram their ideology down our throats. Their priorities are clear. The word queer appears 6 times in the guide, whereas hunger doesn't appear once. The terms colonial or decolonise appear 65 times. Thirst doesn't appear at all. The comedian Jerry Sadowitz once said, "I don't give to charity on principle. The principle being that I don't want to help anybody." Of course, the real reason he didn't give to charity is that he didn't have any money after the BBC destroyed his career for outing Jimmy Savile as a kiddie fiddler years before anybody else did. But it turns out that Oxfam don't want to help anyone either. When you donate to Oxfam, you're paying them to sit around pontificating and spreading harmful ideologies instead of helping people. Decolonise Oxfam's bank account, but don't decolonise mine. Support me making these videos on Patreon. From as little as £3 a month, you can help provide clean water to a struggling comedian. As an extra special bonus, I promise to never ever make you read a 92-page guide on inclusive language that calls you evil. Also, like and subscribe and share this video to piss off blue-haired angry leftoids on social media. Thanks for listening. I'll be Luke here. Bye. Bye bye.